Hey guys, welcome back to John's Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm John, and as always, thank you guys for being here. I hope you guys won your matchups last week, and we are entering Week 8. Happy Halloween. If you guys are listening to this, it is Halloween weekend. Hopefully you guys had fun. Hopefully you guys maybe went out last night, maybe doing some stuff tonight. Tomorrow is Halloween Eve, and then Monday, hopefully you guys have some plans. Last year, I remember going live on Halloween, which was really cool. But this year, Halloween is on a Monday, which kind of stinks, I guess. Monday, you got to come home from school and then go out trick-or-treating. But some of you guys probably in college, Halloween's probably going to be, not too exciting. For me, I work full-time, so just going to be a normal day probably for me. Probably get no trick-or-treaters in an apartment. But in terms of the fantasy football landscape for this week, I am going to be giving my thoughts on a bunch of different players and different situations. Of course, we had Matt Ryan being benched for the rest of the season, not injury-related. Sam Ehlinger is in at quarterback now and should be for the rest of the season. They want to see what he looks like and give him a chance. ETN is now the starter in Jacksonville after James Robinson was traded to the Jets with Breece Hall tearing his ACL. I'm going to give my thoughts on Cortland Sutton. I've had a lot of people ask about him after back-to-back games under six fantasy points. And then giving my thoughts on Daryl Henderson and also Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, because maybe you have Harris and you're worried about him. Maybe you have Stevenson and you don't know if he's going to keep up the good work. I'm going to talk about all those guys and what these moves and what these players have effect on other players and basically what I think about them for the rest of the season. So I'm going to start off with McCaffrey. Obviously, he went to the 49ers. He had 8 fantasy points last week. I think he has another tough matchup this week. The Rams, it's going to be tough to run on them, but let's see how much he's used out of the backfield. I want to see him be more involved in the passing game. The 49ers, to be honest, don't pass it to their running backs too much, but they're going to have to get some screens in there. They're going to have to get McCaffrey going on some option routes, maybe some Texas routes to get the ball in his hands more. I still don't like Debo as much as I did before the McCaffrey trade, but let's see how this week goes for Debo. He does have I think it's a hamstring injury. He is day-to-day, but he should be able to play. Hold him for another week. Let's see how he does, but I'm not too high on him. McCaffrey, I don't think McCaffrey, initially I thought McCaffrey, it was a huge upgrade for him going to the 49ers, but I don't think it's a huge upgrade because the Panthers actually threw him a ball a lot. Now McCaffrey should be able to score more touchdowns on the 49ers, but in terms of passing game usage, he's going to be used less. So it probably evens out. I still like McCaffrey. Same value as before. So if you have him, he's still a top 5 running back for me for the rest of the season, so I would keep him. Now I'm going to talk about Sam Ehlinger now in at quarterback. So what do you do with Michael Pittman? What about Jonathan Taylor? Hasn't performed too much. What about Paris Campbell? Had a couple great games, great game last week. And what about Alec Pierce? I mean, Campbell and Michael Pittman led in targets over Pierce last week, but should I keep Pierce? Should I trade Pierce? So I think Michael Pittman, you should try to keep him. I don't think his value is super high right now with Ehlinger at quarterback, but Ehlinger's probably going to throw the ball. He's not a great quarterback. He did a couple good things in preseason, but in terms of Pittman, I would see what you can get. Like I always say, see what you can get for Pittman, but I would probably keep him unless you can get something really good. If you can get a guy like Chris Godwin, I would do that for Pittman. I would give up Pittman to get Chris Godwin, and I would do that right now because I think Godwin and this Buccaneers offense is going to figure it out. They have a mini bye leading up to their game against the Rams, but then they have their bye in 2 weeks. So I think they're going to figure it out towards the second half of the season, and Godwin's been targeted a lot. And when you're targeted a lot by Brady, I know it hasn't been much yet, but I think it's going to keep going up, and the value is there because he's getting the targets. In terms of Jonathan Taylor, I would keep him. He looks pretty healthy coming off of that high ankle sprain. He plays the Commanders tomorrow. I think he's going to have a great game, and I like him for the rest of the season. If you don't have him, you might want to try to trade for him, giving up a guy like who I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, Ramondre Stevenson. You can give up a guy like that and get Jonathan Taylor because in Week 16, the fantasy football semifinals, he plays the Los Angeles Chargers. They give up so many fantasy points to running backs, so they just let Kenneth Walker get 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I like Taylor's matchup in week 16. Not that you should trade for him just for that, but I do think he has some good matchups in the later weeks. And even with Ellinger at quarterback, Jonathan Taylor on that offensive line should be able to figure it out, and that defense should be able to play well enough for Taylor to get the touches he needs while being ahead in the game. In terms of Pierce or Campbell, I don't really like them. Campbell isn't really rosterable unless you're in like a 14-man league, and even if you're there, you probably aren't even starting him at flex, but you might take the chance on him. Same thing with Alec Pierce. You probably roster him, but I'm not too high on him with Ellinger at quarterback. The only guys I really kind of trust are Taylor and Pittman in this offense. So if you have them, I wouldn't be too excited. Maybe trade them away if you can get any sort of value. Maybe trade Alec Pierce away for a guy like Brandon Cooks, who I think could have a better second half of the season than Pierce. But that's what I would do with them. And then James Robinson going to the Jets. James Robinson does have a little bit of an injury, but he should be fine for the rest of the season. Michael Carter is there. Ty Johnson is there as well. I expect, at least this week against the Patriots, Michael Carter to get most of the work, especially because Robinson just got on the team. I mean, if it was McCaffrey coming over to a new team, obviously you're going to try to get him involved as much as you can. But James Robinson coming onto a new team, I expect Carter to be a pretty decent option this week. Should get at least 12 to 15 fantasy points. I think his floor is around 10. I don't think he's going to get less than 10 because I think he's going to be involved in the passing game, and he's the RB1 for this week. Now, in terms of moving forward, they actually have a couple tough matchups. They play the Patriots this week, which is kind of tough. I mean, the Bears ran for a lot last Monday night, but they play the Bills the next week, and then after that they have a bye. So honestly, I think if you have James Robinson or Michael Carter, I would keep them for now. If you don't have James Robinson or Michael Carter, don't trade for them yet. But after 2 weeks, after they play the Patriots and after they play the Bills, I expect both of them, Carter and Robinson, not to have great games. Like I said, I think Carter could have like maybe 12, 14 points this week, but then next week, I think they're both going to end up with like 10 or less. So I like then, once they are going on a bye, you can trade for them. And if you're looking for an RB2 with some high upside, maybe you're in a league, a 12-man league, 14-man league, where you really need that RB2 help and take a chance on somebody, Carter and Robinson could be those guys. And another reason why I like them is because in the fantasy football semifinals, they play the Jacksonville Jaguars. They give up the seventh most fantasy points to running backs. And then in the fantasy football finals, in week 17, they play the Seattle Seahawks, who give up the fifth most fantasy points to running backs. So I like them later in the season, but I would wait to trade for them if you're looking for an RB2. Again, not amazing options, but they are somebody you could grab if you're looking for an RB2. Then I'm going to talk about Cortland Sutton. I actually like Cortland Sutton. I know he's had some down weeks. Russell Wilson is hurt, and they're playing tomorrow morning in London. And I'm not too high on Sutton this week. I mean, hopefully Wilson can get back out there. But in terms of a long-term view, I like Sutton. I think Russ is going to keep throwing the ball. I mean, they really can't run the ball without Javonte Williams there. So I think they're going to throw the ball a lot, and Sutton's been the highest targeted player in this offense. And honestly, it could be a buy low opportunity. I don't think Sutton's going to be a wide receiver 1, but he's a solid wide receiver 2 for me for the rest of the season. So if you have a guy like Michael Pittman, I would trade him for a guy like Cortland Sutton. I actually like Sutton more the rest of the season than Michael Pittman. And one of the reasons is because he has a lot of great matchups after his bye in a couple weeks. So they play the Titans. They always give up a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers. The Panthers usually give up a lot to wide receivers. They play the Chiefs twice, who've given up the 5th most fantasy points to receivers. So he has a lot of green matchups in the rest of the season. So I like Sutton. He's the flex in one of my 12-man leagues. I have Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I like that trio, and I'm going to keep that. And I urge you to do the same. If you have Sutton, I would keep him because he probably doesn't have much trade value right now anyway. But if you don't have Sutton, you might be able to give somebody up. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can give a guy like Terry McLaurin, give him for Sutton, or maybe a Curtis Samuel for Sutton, because I like McLaurin now that Heineke's there because they had that connection from last season, but I'm still not too high on McLaurin. He only had that one touchdown. Other than that, he would have ended up with less than 10 points. So I like Sutton more than McLaurin, more than a guy like Curtis Samuel for the rest of the season. And then I'm going to talk about Daryl Henderson. He is the starter as of right now for the Rams, but if you guys have listened to my live, listened to the Chalkboard, You've heard me talk about Kyren Williams. I think he's coming off IR in either this week or next week, and I think he's going to make some noise. I think he's going to be used in this offense. Daryl Henderson, he's going to be splitting time with Malcolm Brown and Kyren Williams, and I think Kyren Williams could eventually, in 3-4 weeks, take over as the starting running back for the Rams. So if you have Daryl Henderson, I'd try to trade him right now. I'd try to trade him before the game tomorrow. I'd honestly even trade Daryl Henderson for a guy like Michael Carter or James Robinson. Take a shot on them instead of Henderson, because Henderson plays the 49ers tomorrow. He's not going to have a good game. It's tough to run on the 49ers. They didn't have a lot of success. The Rams did the last time they played the 49ers. So I expect Henderson to have a bad game this week, and I would trade him away before he has that bad game. Maybe you get a guy like Carter or Robinson, take the chance on them, because these running backs, they're risky, and you want to get those backups. You want to get those guys with high upside. We've seen a lot of guys get injured, and Carter could be the RB1 for the next few weeks, but Robinson could be the RB1 later in the season. So take a chance on them if you have Henderson. And then the last two guys I'm going to talk about are Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Obviously, Harris was hurt the last couple weeks. Stevenson has gotten over 13 fantasy points basically the last 5 weeks, over 20 fantasy points 3 of those 5 weeks. So Ramondre Stevenson has been running super well, but I actually would trade away Ramondre Stevenson. I would trade him away for Travis Etienne right now if you could. Obviously, Etienne hasn't even had a 20-point game yet. Everybody thinks he's going to have over 20 points in the next few weeks, and he's going to be the RB1 and just used a lot. And I don't think they're wrong with that. I think they're correct. I actually don't like Etienne a lot this week, tomorrow morning against the Broncos in London. I don't think he's going to have a great week. So here's what I would do if I were you. I would wait until after this week. If I had Ramondre Stevenson, wait until after this week, because I expect Stevenson to get probably 60 to 70% of the touches against the Jets tomorrow. And I would probably keep Stevenson, because I think Stevenson's going to do better than Etienne tomorrow. Wait for Stevenson to have another good game. And then I would reach out to the owner of Etienne in your league, and I would trade Stevenson straight up for Etienne. Because let's say Stevenson gets, 16, 17 points tomorrow, and Etienne gets more like 12, 13 points. That's perfect opportunity. Stevenson gets another game over 15 points. The Patriots are using Stevenson. I think that Harris is going to get used more as the season goes on, and so it'll be more of a split, but who knows? But I would rather have Etienne, the starting running back for the Jaguars, getting carries and getting catches out of the backfield. I'd rather have him than Stevenson for the rest of the season. So that's what I would do if I had Stevenson. If you have Damian Harris, hold on to him, because I doubt that you'll be able to get much value for him now. So I would keep him, not drop him. But if you have Stevenson, that's what I would do. Try to get a guy like Dameon Pierce, like a Travis Etienne, like a Ken Walker, which you probably can't get at this point because of what he did against the Chargers. But that's what I would do if I had Stevenson. So that's all I have, kind of like a quick, short podcast for you guys. Definitely comment your questions down below. Thank you guys for being here. And as always, good luck in your matchups. Join the Chalkboard to get all of my advice, and basically for me to answer your questions in between the live and 1 o'clock Eastern time. Right when I end the live, I go over and answer all of your guys' questions. And go over to the Chalkboard, because remember last week I had a Q&A segment. I'm going to do that at least one more time, hopefully 2 more times before the season ends. I want to get your guys' questions answered on this podcast and do a Q&A. So definitely head over to the Chalkboard. The link will be in the description. And it's a free app to download, and it's a free board to join. You could keep it up to date with the Dorm Debate news. And you can comment your questions for podcast ideas, and I could shout you out here on the podcast like I did to a bunch of people last week. So good luck in your matchups tomorrow. Enjoy the London game, and happy Halloween. I hope you guys enjoy your Halloween on Monday.